Iranians, one page at a time here. So the last thing we said was that Hashem thought to create the world with the midah of din. He thought it would last. Partnered with the midah of rachamim. We started to explain a little bit deeper into that. We said this is the idea of essentially chesed and gevura. We brought the mashal back about the cups that the king. What is the mashal like? The king has fragile cups. If he puts the hot into it, which is basically making the world with the midah of din, they'll smash. If it's the cold, they'll get dirty, they become frosty. So we were at the point of explaining what does it mean if they're cold, they'll get frosty. We started to explain if he makes the world with too much rachamim, not enough gevuras, then sin will basically amplify in the world because no one will be afraid of punishment. And then we started to explain that once in a while, a person should really arouse themselves to have fear of punishment. We started talking about Gehenna a little bit, and we started to explain that even though having fear of punishment is a very kind of low-level avodas Hashem. Why? Because it entails a certain level of yeshus. Because basically you're afraid that you're going to lose your own yeshus. If you're only afraid that you're going to be punished for punishment's sake, then it's really all about you. And we said that's really not in the realm of Kedusha. However, it is in the realm of Klippas Noga. And in Klippas Noga itself, it's the Tov Sheba Noga. In other words, it's the only way of really elevating the Noga. That's why we actually brought the famous quote from the Zohar and from the Tanya. I take it back. It's from the Sanhedrin, Gemara of Sanhedrin and Tanya, that from the forest itself comes the handle for the axe. The idea is that you have to use sometimes the elements of evil to destroy evil. And in this case as well, by going and using your yeshus to essentially serve God with it, because it's your very yeshus that you're being afraid to lose, that you're actually doing sur meirah. It's a type of hishapcha in a certain sense. Even though we're not giving it so much credit, we're still saying that it's basically serving more or less yourself, but nonetheless, it's necessary and required sometimes as a sort of gateway in. Yeah, remember all that? Okay, so now we'll take it from page Chaf Zayin. And we said, Levadzos, Shaydei Gevuros Shomer Minachet. So one thing the Gevura does is guards you from sin, as we just got through saying. We're saying, why does Hashem need Gevura in the world? We just dealt with one. It guards from sin. Odzos, furthermore, Shavoda Gufa Ba'im Agdei Zeh Lavoda Naile Harbe Yoser Min Avoda Sha'agdei Bechinas Midas HaChesed V'Rachamim. This is a whole other level and a really much more positive take on Gevura, that the Avoda itself, through the Avoda of Gevura itself, you come to a much, much higher state of Avoda than you could ever come to through the Avoda of Chesed and Rachamim. Because as it says in the Zohar, on the Pasuk, Va'avad halevi hu. Right, so this is an interesting Pasuk. We've discussed it actually in previous memorim. But it says basically, in the simple reading of what these words mean, it means that the hu is like almost like an extra word in the sentence. It means like the Levi will serve, he will. Right? Avad halevi hu, he. But it's kind of a funny thing, and the Zohar picks up on this reality that what is it really saying? That Avad halevi, that the Levi serves the level called hu. Avad halevi hu, he serves hu. Suhu da atika, right? Furthermore, this is now a quote from the Zohar, that hu da atika. Suhu, this extra hu, suhu, it's like a little interesting verbiage. This extra hu, da atika, refers to atika, which means that the Levi serves atika. What does the Levi generally represent? Gevura. So you see that when it comes to the Levi, he reaches up to the atika, something you can't reach with chesed. Ilmale dina ishtachach ba'alma, and he goes further, if it wasn't that din was found in the world, lo havi yade b'nei nasha, people would not know mehemanusa ilah, from the higher faith, basically.
What is mehemanusa?
Faith.
In Aramaic?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, where are we? Which line?
4 lines down, 4 words in. V'lo yishtadlun b'nei nash be'oraisa. And the Bnei Nash means people, and Hishtadlun is like Hishtadlus, right? They wouldn't like work and strive in the Torah, right? It gives that extra kick. The Gevurah is like the reason why we're all here this morning after being woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning by sirens and then running to this thing and then not being able to get back to sleep. And we're all, I don't know about you guys, but Rabbi Koppel's words were unfortunately ringing in my ears. If the pilots aren't getting any sleep and the Tamimim should sleep. So it's like, that's a Gevurah's attitude. It came from a Levi also, right? In other words, like, so what if you're tired? You know, so all of a sudden you bring out certain aspects of Avodas Hashem that if you were just taking it easy on yourself, mothering yourself, you'd sleep in, you wouldn't find these depths of your soul. So the idea of no one would, the shtadlun beraisa, like the servitude, that it's not about enjoying yourself, right?
This is cold water?
This is hot water, my friend.
Oh, of course you use the wrong cup.
I mean, over here, all the cups, we kind of trade them around. Anyway, the idea being is that if it wasn't that din was found in the world, there wouldn't be this higher faith, and you wouldn't strive in Torah. Pulchana shleimusa dishtachach ba'alma. What's pulchana? Anyone? Avoda shleimusa, the whole and perfect service. Dishkachach ba'alma, that's found in the world. Legabi malka kadisha, as far as the higher king is concerned, right? Man avidle, who does it? Who does the perfect service as far as the king is concerned? Havi omer da levia ad kan loshana. That's the Levi. He's your man, right? Because he's a Gevurah. He's like, he doesn't mess around, right? It's all about, you know, striving and going up. And remember, the Levim were the ones that sent out, Moshe said, Mila Hashem Elai, whoever's for God with me. At the time of the golden calf, they all ran over. They never quit, right? They killed their own family members on Mesiras Nefesh. They were willing to fight Bnei Israel even for the sake of God. Like it's a crazy high level of Avas Yisrael to fight a Jew for the sake of himself. In any case, who does the perfect service of the king above? This is the Levi. Ad kan lashona.
Yeah,
That means end of quote. Yeah. Ad kan lashona. That's the end of the quote of the Zohar. The daf kagdei levim shehem mikava smol. Specifically, the Levi who comes from the left side, bechinas gevura midas hadin. That's the only way to come to the true service. Ad shem shichu b'avudasam gilu bechinas atika shenikra hu. To the point that you draw down with your service this level of atik, which is called hu. Remember we said hu ushmo, that hu represents like the essence. Masha ein kein imay arak bechinas chesed v'rachmim blidin. If you only served Hashem with the cold water, right, the chesed and rachamim without judgment, lo ayu baim klal ba'vodasam l'mayla madregazu k'mo gedel midas hadin. You would never come to this level of service of that you achieve through the midah of din. V'lo ayu mamshichim or elyon kazeh, and they would not ever draw down such a high light k'mo ba'avodah sh'agdei midas hadin, like the vodah that's done through midah of din, right? So, besides the kind of yeshus level of avoda that just should be fearing punishment, we've now kind of gone into a much higher strain of serving God with gevura. Why there needs to be hot water in those cups. So now he concludes in the next paragraph to sort of give us an overview. He says, Nimtza comes out from here. Turns out, if you're paying attention, there's an advantage of serving God with the midah of din over the chesed and rachamim in three different things. Aleph, right? So one is, if you only had chesed and rachamim, chatoim sagin. What does it mean? Sin would be plentiful, mighty. There'd be too much sin in the world. You might do the mitzvahs, but you wouldn't mishtadil. You wouldn't be toiling in the Torah and the fulfillment of mitzvahs either on the side of surmei rava asay tov. right? That gevura pumps up the level. So basically what he's saying, no, we didn't get to the second one yet. We're still in the first one. So he's saying if it was only chesed and rachman, there'd be too much sin in the world, which means basically people would just be lazy and they wouldn't get the job done of doing mitzvahs sur merav aseh tov. V'zeh shekasub b'zor ilmali dina lo ha mishtadlim b'nei nash be'oraisa. And that's what it says in the Zohar that we just read, that if it wasn't for din, people would not be serving in the Torah. And by fearing this punishment of the din, that's what basically gets people to be careful about fulfilling the mitzvahs, negative and positive. So that's one. The second level, base, shagam ba'avoda yesh yisron ma'ila ba'avoda sha'al yedei midas hadin. Secondly, besides just not allowing too much sin in the world, it's sort of like keeping you from that negative outcome, there's also a positive outcome, which is that the ma'ila of avoda through the din is avoda is higher than the avoda al yedei midas hachesed v'rachmim. It's just a higher level service. As it says in the Zohar, Pulchana Shleimusa di Ishkachek ba'almim, and we're bringing back these quotes. The perfect service that's found in the world, Hu Aydei Levim Shemikav Asmo. So that's just basically raising the bar to serve God greater. And Gimel Sha'aydei Zemam Shichim Gilu or Elyon Yoser Bechinas Atika. And furthermore, the third point is that through Gevura, not only are you raising yourself to a higher level of service, but you draw down the highest level of kedusha that's possible, which is the level of atika. The Zesha Amar, that's what the Zohar says. Lo hayu yadei mehemunusa ilah kim ayde bechinas kav hasmo. We would never know about this like higher faith. We'd never know about this level of atika, right? Hashem wouldn't have revealed that to us unless we served Him with gevura. So those three things, you got them. The second thing is that the avoda is a higher level actually than the avoda of chesed. Right. The first one is that it's sort of a low avoda, but it keeps you from sin. The second one is that if you use gevura properly, it can actually raise you to this level of the Levi who's serving Hashem perfectly, right? In other words, it pushes you to do more than you would normally do. It's not just saving you from sin at that point, it's like an extra jolt of intensity in your avoda. And thirdly, because of that, it draws down from the highest levels. The pasuk in Shir Hashirim, it says that his left hand is under my head and his right hand embraces me.
Is embrace?
Yeah, like chibuk is a hug. So what are we seeing here? The connection between the left hand and the head. That through the service with the left hand, which is called smol doche, which basically means hiskafia, pushing things away, you come to the rosh, right? Which is the essence of the soul. You access the essence of the soul specifically by using your gevuras. And this is sort of like the second thing that he was, the second advantage he was talking about in the previous paragraph, that through serving with din, right, you reach a higher avoda than you could with what we call yamin mekareves. Smol docha, the yamin mekareves goes the saying. Your left hand pushes away, your right hand brings close. They're both very important aspects of divine service, but the left hand pushing away brings you to the rosh, the essence of the soul. The smol docha nishbar libo bakirbo. Why is that? Because when you use this quality of your divine service, it's that you wind up with a broken heart. Right? Nishbar libo bakirbo. Because you're not like allowing yourself all these leniencies and luxuries and pampering yourself. So the whole quality of serving God with discipline is basically like brings to like a sort of a broken heart. Va'az mizgal pnimiyah shel hanefesh. And when you break the heart, you sort of squeeze it and the good part comes out, right? You reach the pnimiyus of your soul in difficult times. Right, when you don't make life simple for yourself, but you struggle and you toil and you like push yourself, right? It kind of breaks you, but it also releases a very deep inner depth from you. V'kamay medrav masifta, delo salik bein nahora mevachin le, gufa delo salik bein nahora denishmasa mevachin le. Also quoted in the Tanya, and it says what? Wood that does not bring up a flame, like smash it. You getting these words? Gufa, your body, that doesn't bring up the flame of your soul, you should also smash it, break it into pieces. Right? So this is the idea of like, if you want the fire to burn, you got to put to discipline and break yourself. Only through this, specifically through this, will your soul come alight. So it was like finding your inner panemius is only really possible if you put on the heavy discipline. Unfortunately. The commercial klippas egos and mechas ala pri. And he says, for example, you can see this, widely throughout the natural kingdom. He says that the nut shell covers over the fruit, right? And va'aydesh shoved in my klippa means gala pri. How do you get the fruit out? You have to smash the klippa. You have to break it. It doesn't come out without some smashing. What's the fruit of your soul? It is the hidden love inside your soul. And the body and the animal soul, they serve to cover it. They're like a shell on this beautiful fruit of your hidden love for God. That's why Hashem says, I've descended into a nut garden. That's this place. Right? But the world is called a nut garden for this reason, right? Because basically it's a garden of nuts.
Everybody's nuts.
Do you read?
Everyone's going nuts.
You got
the garden of nuts. Garden of nuts. I like it. Garden of nuts. Everybody goes nuts.
You're doing it. You're doing great.
We ever have to rename spot? We renamed spot Garden of Nuts.
What's that now?
We renamed spot.
We don't have to rename. It's the whole place is called the Nut Garden. Do you read us on the Shema, Beguf and Nevesh Bahamis, the descent of the soul into the body, the animal soul, Hikamo Priya Egos, it is like a nut, a fruit of a nut. Which is, why is he using the word nut? Because it's in a hard shell. Not every fruit comes in such an intense shell that you have to smash it in order to get the insides to come out. Some you could just eat the shell, right? This is an intense level of something blocking you from the goodies inside. Right? And by basically a person being returned to a point of brokenness, doing tshuva until he's broken, it creates a broken and contrite heart, leiv nishbar v'nidke, and through this, misgalea priva panimius, all of a sudden, you reveal the inner depths of your soul. Shu b'chinas reusa deliba, which is really the will of the heart. You wind up like reattaching yourself to the truth, what it's all about. You stop getting lost in the frivolities of life, right? When you go on a diet, whether it's a diet from whatever passions you have. In this capacity, we're out right now going on a diet from sleep. But it works, it's like you push yourself, and all of a sudden, you remember what life is all about. On the pasuk, Zayis Ra'anan Yafeh Pri Toar. The pasuk there, from Yirmiyah, it says a ripe olive, Yafeh Pri Toar, is a beautiful fruit of a fine shape, right? Like of a good shape. Lama nimshalu Yisrael azayis. But the question is, this is really referring to the Jewish people who are called this beautiful fruit. Why are we called the fruit of an olive? Right? Why are we compared to an olive? That just like an olive, when you crush it and grind it, you bring out its oil. Kach Yisrael chulei. So that's why we're compared to an olive, because basically we only work when you crush us, right? You got to get the fruit out. And zeu tachlis hakavana shel small docher. And this is why, getting back to our mimer, come on in, why Hashem made the world with hot water. Because remember, our main question was, if Hashem is teva hatov lehetiv, and Hashem is good and he only wants to do good. We are answering a question, by the way, we forgot about. Then why when it says al machshava livro sa'olam b'midas adin, it went up in his mind to create the world with the midah of din. We said, why? I thought you were nice, right? This is God we're talking about. So we said this is nice, right? Because the reality is that there's certain things that can only be achieved through the midah of din. You can only find the panemius and the truth through the midah of din. What is it now? What do you want to say?
I was just thinking.
It's dangerous.
Tohu would be din, right? I meant rachman, right?
I have, as of this point, no comment. What are you trying to say?
No, because I was thinking about the first 2,000 years of the world. Weren't they like?
Yeah, Hashem didn't bring the punishment so much.
Right.
The first
And then
1,000 years. The
after-
first 1,000 years. The first 1,000
then
years.
after
The first 1,000 years.
first 1,000.
That's why people
I was
lived
gonna
to
say
1,000
the
years. The Mabul was in the second 1,000 years. That's when the din came.
Right. And don't we say the marble is hot waters?
Okay,
So.
you got something there. Vezeu tachlis hakavana shel small docha. This is the purpose of there being this small docha, this gevuras. Sheinu amisi mitzad atzmu chas v'shalom. The idea is that it's not something true in and of itself, right? So in other words, just being mean and just being disciplined for its own sake is not the point. That's not really a good thing. The point is that you're doing that, putting that pressure on because of the beautiful thing that comes out, the diamond that comes out, the olive oil that comes out. So it's not. So that's why we tend to think of gevura in a negative light, or din, and join us. Listen, we said already over here.
God knows.
Well, the child's got money, he can afford pads.
So the point is that we tend to think sometimes the midah of din as cruelty, and it is. If the intention is just for the sake of punishment and not for the sake of bringing out the finest qualities inside of you, then you're missing the whole point of the small docha, which is why it has basically a bad reputation. The purpose of it is to get the shell off, to break the shell and to reveal the hidden love, and the will of the heart. And this is a nice piece of information. We don't need Iranians for this. The bitush, the beating of yourself and the breaking of your shell, does not have to come from above specifically. In other words, you don't have to have like life beat you down, although that will work as well, right? But you don't have to have life beat you down in order to find your inner light. It could be sufficient if you'll do it to yourself. And actually, that's a really good advertisement for doing it for yourself, because if you are disciplined, you will not need to be disciplined, right? And it's not fun to be disciplined, right? Like having someone else put these restrictions on you feels a lot less empowering than putting them on yourself. But what's that? You don't need both, is what he's saying here. If you do it to yourself, if you're a disciplined person, you'll be able to bring out your panemius, and there'll be no need for it to be done to you. You can do it yourself. And this is what we say. When are we supposed to do this? Every morning. This is really kind of what Chassidus is all about, especially when we talk about Gehenna, right? A person should not come to pray, right? The Gemara says, unless you get yourself first into a state of Kovid Rosh. What does Kovid Rosh mean? It means like a heavy head, literally. It means literally a heavy head. But really it means, in the simplest sense, it means you should not stand before Hashem like frivolously, right? You can't just like kind of roll out and be in the middle of a casual conversation and think you're going to now have a manu imanu with the creator of heavens and earth.
What does COVID mean?
Heavy, right? And he says, what does the actual words mean? You need a Rashi for this actually, because everyone has the same question. What is exactly COVID rosh? But if it's the opposite of kalus rosh, right? Which means frivolity. So it means the opposite of frivolity. What would you call that? Seriousness. Shu bechinas hachna v'shiflus. And the way Rashi describes it is that it's basically subjugation and lowliness. Like, put yourself in your place, son, before you stand before the Lord of hosts. Subjugation and lowliness. Targum Pasternak. And the idea is that through it doesn't need a targum. It's basically words that we see every day. That through this, you will come in your davening to a much, much higher level. In other words, that's the point. You bring yourself to a state of gevuras, right? And sort of restrict yourself and try to, and essentially this can be accomplished also by meditating deeply on godly concepts, because that's also an act of sort of gevura. You're going to take sort of your la-di-da wake-up person who is just stumbling to get your coffee, and all of a sudden you concentrate intensely on the truth of reality and the truth of the matter. So that's called crushing your shell, right? And therefore, when it comes to davening now, you're going to daven with your panemius, and you're going to be real, and you're going to bring it all out. Bira Inyan. Time? We have time.
15 minutes.
Bira Inyan. Mailas avoda sha'ayde bechinas hachna v'shiflos. Let's understand the advantage of this avoda which we're doing through hachna v'shiflos, which means what? Targum Tabaski?
No, it's still the process of computing.
Subjugation and lowliness. Koved Rosh.
Kana, is that just doesn't look that familiar. Is there a word? Is there a place that pops up for subjugation that I would recognize?
Not really. It's pretty much that's the word. I don't know if it in other contexts so much. If I come across it, I'll let you know. Bli Nader. So anyway, what's so great about this type of service of hachna, subjugation, lowliness, koved rosh, right? Again, it's the opposite. It's we call it seriousness. Ha'inyan hu, dehine yedua sheyesh gim b'chinas ava. Oh, now we're going to go on a whole journey, which is going to go to the end of the mimer practically. There's 3 levels of love, as is known. Loving God with all your heart, your soul, and your might. Now the first 2 levels of love. If you remember from Tanya, there's many different loves described in the Tanya. Sometimes it's hard to keep up and remember all these loves and distinguish them one from the other. So we're going to focus for a hot minute here on this one. And it's called a type of love which comes from you love God because you love God because He's your life. This is like a meditation which should bring a person to a certain type of love. And what type of love does it bring you to? A love of b'chol levavcha and b'chol nafshecha. In other words, it'll get you to the stage 1 and 2. Loving God because He's your life. Sha'al zed ne'emar. Regarding, what does it mean that He's your life? So it says, Re'ei nasati tefanecha es hachayim ves hatov ves hamabes ves hara chule ubacharta b'chayim chule. The pasuk says, see, I have placed before you life and good, and the opposite of life and evil, and you shall choose life. Right? And what is it talking about? I put before you life and the opposite of life. Because in every single physical entity, good morning, in every single physical entity, there's something called the gashmias and the ruchnias of that entity. The ruchnius, he bechinas chayus eloki, hamachayim mahaves hageshem anivra. So how can you tell the difference? Very simply. The spirituality inside of every entity is the godly life force which is giving it life and bringing it to be of the physical creation. In other words, everything is at some level, right, at its core level, elokus, right? Hashem is speaking the world into creation every second. There's no existence except for the letters which are streaming presently out of his mouth and making things be, like we are reading in Shar Yichud V'Amunah right now in the Tanya, Liolam Hashem Devarcha Nitzav B'Shamayim. Your word is standing in the heavens. The words Yehi Rakia B'Soch Hamayim are there, making the heavens be there, right? So there's a godliness inherent in every single thing, and that's called the ruchnius of that thing. B'kamo b'chai u'medaber. He says, for example, let's look at the two levels of life force called animal and man. Hini ha-nefesh shebo hu ha-machayes ha-guf ha-bali chaim, o ha-medaber, right? So the soul, which enlivens the body of the animal or the man, lios bechinas chai u'medaber, which makes him either an animal or a man, right? This is the nefesh. It would be stalek ha-nefesh min ha-guf, and God forbid, if that nefesh leaves the body, yatsa guf migerer chai v'is batel chayuso. Then the body ceases to be alive, and its life force is negated. V'gam gufo nirka v'nase la'afar. And not only that, but also his body starts to disintegrate and becomes back to the element of afar, of earth. And why is that? Because even the existence of the body is also from a certain life force which is enlivening it. So you can see that there's a life force in something. Simply put, the life force is the personality of your cow Bessie, or God forbid, your good friend. And you can see that life force in the body. Obviously, there's a ruchnius inside of this thing, and when it goes away, you see the body stays there by itself, and it doesn't have that life force. You can see that there's the ikar life force is the ruchnius. But furthermore, even when, God forbid, it's dead, the fact that it decomposes means that even when it's dead, there's a certain life force in it, which also could sort of leave it and turn it back into afar. Now, even though that's lower life force, which is enlivening the body itself, which means to say the actual physical body and keeping it there, even when the soul leaves, that's not from what we call the nefesh hachai or medaber, right, which encloaks inside of it in a way of or panimi. So let's explain. There's obviously different life forces. There's domim, tzomech, chai, and medaber, right? So the life force which remains in the goof after the soul leaves is no longer from the level of chai and medaber, right? That's what left when the person dies. But it still has a different life force in it, which could be the life force, let's say, of even someach, right? Because you see that the fingernails still grow and the hair still grows after the person dies for a certain level, right? So that there's still a certain like vegetative and certainly domain life force is still in there, right? But the or panimi, the which is called like the light which fills, which is the actual life of the chai and the medaber, that's gone out, right? And you're left with just the life force which is left over in the goof itself.
What's the life? What is the existence life force?
It's called domain.
The fact that it simply exists.
Yeah.
That's the cloaking of God, cloaking of God's radiance that allows them to exist. It's a concealment.
Well, again, we're saying that in every state there can be looking at the gashmis or the ruchnius of the thing. So the ruchnius of everything, even at that lowest state of the domain, there's a spirituality inside of there, and it's being enlivened at every second in order for it to exist here. If it just disappears from existence, then that life force is no longer there. Or if Hashem stops saying it for a second, right, it would just cease to exist.
Is it concealment that allows it to exist, or is it God specifically creating it? Or is it both? Depending which way you look at it.
Well, everything that exists that's not the Or Ein Sof, and therefore making everything else negated, is based on some type of concealment. Even the Medaber and the Chai, they only come into this particular form because he's hiding everything, right? The Or Ein Sof. So there's always a concealment in order to give any form of life its particulars, right? But we're not. That concealment can be seen in two different ways. In other words, it's a positive thing, in which case, when it conceals itself, it creates a certain type of ruchnius, which is a life force. And right now, that's what we're focusing on. There's a life in every Gashmias thing. There's even though it's all contracted energy, which in itself is some pre-concealment, but let's get past that level of concealment, because there's different concealments that could come. After you've concealed it and made it from Ein Sof to Medaber or Chai, right? Or even all the way down, there's still an aspect of realizing that it's alive. It's being enlivened by something. Whereas you can see the thing as just Gashmias as well, where you sort of to put on a different lens, and this is really the lens of concealment, where you cease to recognize that there's a life force in this thing. You just think it's a dead rock. And what he's trying to tell you is even the dead rock has a life force. There's a ruchnius life force inside of it, which is making it still be there. Now, this is obvious and plain to see when it comes to a living man, because you can see the difference between when he's dead and alive. So you can see there's a ruchnius in him. But how about when he dies? Can you still see the ruchnius? The fact that his body is going to decompose shows you that there was a difference between the body before it decomposed and the body after it decomposed, because there was a life force in it. That life force is ruchnius, which is making it be there, and even making the fingernails grow, etc. So he's saying, I put life and death before you. He means in every single object that you see, right? You can see the life force, you can see that it's godly, and there's something enlivening it, or you can be in a real state of concealment, where even the fact that there's a godly life, albeit a contracted godly life force, but you can lose sight of that entirely and just see the Gashmias thing as though it's dead, as though it's disconnected from the one above. And that's why Hashem says, I'm giving you a choice. Like, don't he's saying, be wise and realize what everything around you is. It's like, yeah.
How about the things
In between life and death? The mazikin?
Noise,
Careful.
and sight, and light, these kind of things that aren't like objects in themselves. I wouldn't categorize them as domain.
You could, yeah, they are domain though. Light is domain. Noise is basically it's a wave, right? I don't think it has like a consciousness. It's not growing necessarily, right? So it's domain. You only have 4 choices. You got to pick one. Yeah, sound. It's a domain. Look, just like inside of your domain body, right? Something of a higher life force can live inside there. And so we say, like inside of the rocks, right? The man lives inside. Like we say that 2 stones build 2 houses. So you have 2 letters which make 2 words. So even though you have a domain container, you can have a word inside which is like a man, which has meaning and life and so forth. So too in the sound. On one level, you just have the sound, which is just a domain. But in that same sound, you could put information, right? You could put tons of information. And therefore, something's living in there, a higher level of life force, which is like the soul, so to speak, of that sound wave. And so it goes. V'kiyadua sheyesh la'guf makarif ne'atzmo. It's known that the body has its own source. Shemisham hu kiyumo. In other words, the soul does not keep your body alive independently. Your body has its own thing that's making it be there, which is not your soul. And that's obviously true, because when your soul leaves your body hangs around for a hot minute, right? It's not only enlivened by the soul, which is inside of it, animating it. It has its own source. Now, when you put the soul, which enlivens that body, which animates the body, and cloaks it, it comes so all of a sudden, it imbues that independently existing body with the power of movement and kochos, right? Intellect and emotion and chushim and all your senses, your sight and your sound and all those things. But that's sort of like an import into the essential existence of the body, that it has its own source of existence besides your soul. And this is what I just was quoting, is that's why the body does not completely disintegrate the minute the soul leaves it, right? Because the soul is obviously not the thing that's making it be there. Its existence is not from the soul which is enclosed inside of it. It has a chayus, a life force that comes from its own source and its own root. Which is an independent source from that which makes your personality be here. It's kind of weird and crazy to think about, right? Your body has a life of its own, quite literally. As it's explained elsewhere at great length. In fact, this is also the topic of the Tanya of these days, right? That he's basically saying that, why do we say, Bashamayim ma'al, ba'aretz mitachas ein od, right? That you should have this, like, you should know today, like, what's the stress that, well, I would think that there's some other gods in the water, you have to warn me so much. He says, because you might think that Hashem is in the world in the same way that the soul is in the body, right? Which is that, that basically Hashem is enlivening and moving the world around, but basically if he left it, the world would still have its own existence, like your body has its own existence. So he said, no, heavens and earth are not made like that. Even the very existence of the body is also being made by Hashem. And if he decides for an instant to remove it, all would be gone. So that's what he's saying here. When it comes to us, we have two different elements of ourselves. There's the light element and the kli element. And Hashem has to basically bring both of those into existence independently, because one does not enliven the other. The soul does not enliven the body. The soul does not enliven the body. When the soul leaves the body still exists. What did that prove to you? The body's existence does not come from the soul. If it did, as soon as the soul was gone, the body would be gone. Right? The fact the body hangs around after the soul leaves means something else besides the soul is making the body be there. Its own independent life force. Right? It has its own source of life called the kelim, right? Or the goof. Remember, like we've been talking about throughout this whole mimer, there's basically inside of Hashem, there's the essence and the light. There's hu ushmo. There's atik and arich, right? There's the sort of there's these two different levels, right? We've been discussing it at great length. So what we're saying is that the soul comes from the aspect of Hashem, which is light. The body comes from a higher source inside of God, comes from the essence of God, and it's independently there. Even if the light goes away, it doesn't stop Hashem from being able to, bring forth energy from his essence, which creates the body.
But in the Tanya, it says, I think in context to the soul of a tzaddik coming into us and impregnating onto the Talmudim, it says that there's a part of the body which is a part of the soul. I think it's neshama. I think it's still found in the world.
No, but that's actually what we're saying now. In other words, even when the soul leaves the body, there's another aspect of the soul in the body, okay, but it's a different life source than that which is encloaking itself into the body to make it animated. That's what we're saying.
Well, it's like a soul kind of soul?
It's a soul kind of soul. If you want to say it's it's the nefesh, right? Whatever it is, it's still a different source. In other words, it can remain there even when the...
So that's not what enlivens the body even after.
It is, because what we're trying to say is that even when you get down to the dead body analogy, you still have to look for the ruchnius and the gashmius of everything. Right. And there's still a ruchnius element inside of that body. Physical reality. And that's the life of it, right? So to a certain degree, I'm behind you there. There is a certain enlivening force, but I was just trying to say it's not the soul that you normally think of as the soul, like the living personality that animates you.
Physical body existence.
It's like the life of domim. Like it's exactly what we were saying before. What is domim? It's some kind of existence. Yeah.
There's two sides of the same coin. You have aspect of concealment that allows it to exist. I suppose there's different levels of concealment that God is speaking it into being.
And that happens in 4 different, basically, letters. Yud, K, Vav, K. Animal, man, animal, growing and inanimate. All of them are a life force, like what he's saying, like a soul.
Is Elohim is
Elo-
the tzimtzum?
Elohim is what makes you see those 4 different things as 4 different things, as opposed to one infinite or Ein Sof. So it's like the tzimtzum, right?
So is it saying Elohim will guide the Yud K Vav K to sort of hold it in specific?
Yeah. Otherwise, it would all just mush into one. And so, but then there's a further, there's a concealment, which is the Elohim, which makes the Yud K Vav K into 4 different streams of life. But then, we keep getting back to this point, you and I, then there's another concealment, which is that you can mistakenly think that the thing is just Gashmias. That you choose, God forbid, death, instead of seeing that the thing before you is actually a life force, even if it's a rock or a dead body. You're choosing to see that it's just physical. You're ignoring the reality that there is life force in everything. So that's what he's saying. Ubacharta b'chaim means pay attention to the reality that God is enlivening everything, even things that you think are dead. The fact that they're there means they're alive.
Is there some way that, because it's very good work. I mean, you cannot tell that there's like
Listen, I mean, he's God. He knows how to pull this thing off.
It just looks like a stone. There is no
Right.
indication of anything beyond that.
Except for now, having discussed it for a good 25, 30 minutes, you can start to have a sensitivity for that. Slowly. You're right. It's presented to you as death. But when you start to meditate, that's what he's trying to say. Approach your davening with this COVID rosh, concentrate. Don't just be like the frivolous person that pops into this world and is falling for this amazing work that Hashem is doing of concealing himself. Stop before you approach God in prayer and realize that he's in everything, and that's the whole point, right? That Hashem Elokecha hu chayecha. That God, your God is your life force. And this is going to bring you to a love of b'chol levav, b'chol nafshecha, we would hope. We have to wait till tomorrow.
I don't want to appreciate